On the line now is Gary Breen, obviously the former Ireland international. Gary, it's such a pleasure to talk to you about something that isn't Declan Rice.
Oh, it's refreshing. It really is. And the excitement in the build-up to this game. I mean, this fixture doesn't usually require any extra billing, but this one feels pivotal for both clubs. I can't wait for this game.
Why is Manchester United and Liverpool so pivotal for both clubs, particularly Manchester United? Obviously, it's been billed as the game that might lose Liverpool the title, but how big is it for United?
I think it's massive for United because it will be another test of whether or not the hierarchy at United believe that Solskjaer is the right man to take them forward. Now, he's been so impressive in terms of what he's done. He's proved that he was certainly the man of the present in terms of what he's done, the recovery, and how resurgent United are. But whether or not he's the man for the future will be determined by results like this. Can he beat Liverpool? That's why it is so exciting. As you quite rightly said, Liverpool, with a massive game like this, you just feel that if they were to lose or drop points, the initiative then goes back to City. And in terms of how well City are playing, you don't expect them to drop many more points.
How impressed were you with the setup that United went with on Monday night, Gary?
Yeah, very impressive. I mean, it's a functional team, and I think I would be dismissive of everyone saying that United are now playing with a freedom that has enabled the likes of Pogba to play so well. I don't think they are playing with a freedom. I think it's quite obvious how organised they are, certainly out of possession. The very fact that they go to Chelsea and dominate a game that they only had 33% possession shows how organised they are. And I think ultimately what you see is just how compact they are. Shane, you'll recognise it in terms of out of possession. They defend deep, they're compact. But then when they force a turnover, they're able to move up the pitch as a team. In total contrast to at times under Mourinho, where the centre forward more often would get isolated because he wanted defending numbers. You don't see any of that now. You're seeing Pogba supporting the attack. You're seeing the blistering counter-attacking pace that they have again. And although they're at home, I don't expect them to really change their philosophy for this game.
Yeah,
Is there a danger that we're reading too much into that, Shane? That Chelsea do look a bit of a rabble at the moment as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, my thoughts on it, I would have thought that it was Solskjaer's most impressive performance as a manager because, yes, they got the really good result against Spurs, but he started with good tactics that week. I thought he looked a little bit like a deer caught in the headlights in the second half when Pochettino changed shape. He didn't know how to react. And essentially, let's be honest, David De Gea won that game for them more so than Solskjaer. Then when was his next real big test? It was the PSG game, and he's probably failed that one, really, so he has. But I thought Monday night he needed to get his tactics right. I thought it was a big test, and I would have question marks over with him for the long term tactically, but he kind of put me in my place on Monday night, and it'll be interesting to see if he can follow up with another good tactical performance Sunday,
Well, now listen, I totally agree with everything you said there. The very fact he played split strikers against Spurs really pinned Spurs back, bearing in mind their fullbacks like to go. There was areas then in those wide positions, and normally Vertonghen, Alderweireld, so comfortable. They're modern-day centre-halves in being pulled out there. But Rashford put them to the sword. I would argue now, I know Liverpool's fullbacks like to get in advanced areas, but Van Dijk can cope with any player in any situation to the point that no one's beaten him in a 1v1 duel. So they'll be stronger defensively. But I agree with you there. The very fact that De Gea had to make 11 saves suggests that defensively you're not able to cope against the big boys. So that will be interesting. The very fact that PSV dominated in midfield in that Champions League game as well. So, but if they can go and win or get a positive result in what is such an emotional game anyway, it is another feather in his cap.
Yeah, you mentioned the emotional game. If he's had a bit of a love offensive trying to win over the Man United fans, and I think whether he's tried to or whether he's just doing it kind of organically, he's done it anyway. This is a massive game for Man United. You can just imagine the happiness of the Manchester United fans going home if they beat Liverpool, and you'd imagine, Gary, that's one step further to getting the job if they were to manage it, notwithstanding the fact that they obviously enhanced their top four credentials.
Yeah, well, exactly. I think they're nailed on now to get into the top four, Johnny. I still think they're cut adrift in terms of getting back to the very top, and whether or not Solskjaer's a man to make them do it remains to be seen. But I think you're right. Even when they were getting a real lesson at times in midfield against PSG, the home supporters were still singing their hearts out for him. So he has obviously won their affection. But the concern is whether or not it's just because of his past glories with United, or whether or not they do believe he can take this club forward, because Manchester United finishing fourth is not what you expect. And even you can counter that by saying Mourinho even got them to second last year. So I think it's a fascinating game. I think they certainly go into this fixture with real verve. I think there's a lot of tension with a Liverpool team, but that's to be expected. They've got so much to lose, and I wouldn't pay too much a point on the fact that United are playing with such freedom, because the very fact is they're only going to get fourth. When they had to challenge and be challenging for titles and potentially losing titles, I'm not convinced this United squad is good enough.
Would you be concerned at all, Gary, that about Liverpool looking a little bit blunt the other night?
You said tense there as well, which maybe that's fair enough.
Yeah, they certainly didn't look themselves anyway, so they didn't. I mean, there was very, very little threat. I don't know how the keeper a meaningful save to make. One good one actually at the near post from Mane, but that aside, it wasn't really the free-flowing Liverpool that we're used to seeing.
Yeah, but I think that comes with how close they feel they are. I think it's human nature to tense up a little bit, but they have changed considerably, and people don't really recognise it enough in terms of how they play this season to last season. They've got far more control. It's not like a basketball game like it was last year. They'll attack, we'll attack, that type of thing. It's none of that. They've got real control of games, and the very fact that they've been able to do that is because of that back four. And defensively, more than anything, I know the plaudits have gone to Van Dijk and that defensive unit, but you see what they do as a team defensively, and that's highlighted by the fact that they can play a makeshift back four against a team like Bayern and keep a clean sheet nevertheless. So I do think that it's understandable. I don't buy into the fact that they're going to be really nervous. I just think that getting over the line at times, as you well know, is the most difficult part.
I would have thought the big question mark for Klopp in terms of how they go about it Sunday, Gary, would you go with Salah coming in off the side, or would you go with him through the middle? He's kind of chopped and changed between the two approaches. He was a bit wider again Tuesday night. It didn't seem to work. What way would you look at trying to exploit United from that sense?
Well, I think ultimately that remains to be seen who we'll identify. But I don't back that back four of Man United. I wouldn't trust them against that three. And I know they've been misfiring as such in terms of the high standards they normally set, but that's not a back four that can keep out teams as good as that. They proved that for the very fact that De Gea had to make 11 saves against Spurs. They cut them open at will. So I would be concerned. I think probably I wouldn't be surprised to see Salah play on the right to pin Luke Shaw back a little bit. We know Luke Shaw's strength is certainly going forward and creating that little triumph on the left-hand side with Pogba. But it is a concern. I'll be fascinated to see how they go about it. The very fact that they'll be looking to protect themselves against Salah may well create a little bit of space for Mane on the other side. And there's so many head-to-head battles that will be key. Will Henderson have to perform well to stop Pogba, who's been so influential since Solskjaer's got the job, coming deep from midfield and making those runs into 10? So that's another. But there's so many head-to-heads. That's
the big thing, isn't it, Shane? The pace of that Liverpool team when they can counter against what is still a very questionable Man United defence. And you saw it obviously in Mbappe in the PSG game. If Mane can kind of be able to exploit that, it's very, very hard to see Liverpool not creating chances.
Yeah, I'd love to say. I think the best approach really would be to really, really go for it. Even though they're the away side, I'd love to see them throw absolutely everything at it.
Dominate the ball type thing.
I'd like to see maybe Shaqiri come in for Keita. They've kind of gone with a 4-2-3-1 at times where they play Salah as the out and out forward and play Firmino in behind him and Shaqiri and Mane either side. I think they've looked really impressive at times going with that shape. Whether they'd be brave enough to do that being the away side, I wouldn't be 100% sure. You know?
Just one thing, you mentioned Salah there. Do you know how many goals he's gotten against the top six sides this season?
Go ahead, shock me.
What would you say, Gary?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
1. And that was against Arsenal in that Mickey Mouse game where Arsenal were a shambles. His record, he started the season slowly, but basically his goals have mainly comprised that crucial goal against Napoli, obviously. But apart from that in the league, his goals record is generally actually against pretty poor teams. And, we have to revise maybe how we're actually assessing his season, because he has to have a good end to the season, in my mind anyway, to kind of live up to the hype. What would you say, Gary? I mean, what have you made of him?
Well, I think ultimately his reputation goes before him in terms of people doubling up on him, and even the top sides will make countermeasures to make sure that they're not isolated 1v1 situations, so they'll double up. And the top teams ultimately have better defenders. You're quite right to identify Arsenal. They don't, so it's no surprise he scored against him. But I would still expect the threat that he gives you will leave spaces elsewhere. That's why the likes of Mane have to make it count. We know about the fullbacks and how good they are when they get in advanced areas for Liverpool. So if he drives inside, the very fact that he may well start on the right, he won't stay there. He's always attacking the centre of that penalty box, looking to get in and get his strikes on goal. So, listen, I understand the record, but I wouldn't judge him by that as such. I think it's just one of those things that a second season, the Premier League, more than any league in the world, I think, learns very quickly how to cope with people. So they're trying to find solutions, but in terms of doubling up on him, there's space elsewhere.
Which team would be happier with a draw, Gary?
I think probably United. I think a draw at this stage for Liverpool, which going and playing in that such a big game is normally a positive, but it's so tight now. If they were to drop 2 points now and give the initiative back to City with their momentum, I would fear for them as such, because I think they're literally hanging on. So I think possibly United would think of a draw as more positive than Liverpool.
Who do the Man United fans actually want to win the title as well? Do you know, it must be like choosing between bad and worse.
Listen, there's no doubt. They want City to win it. They don't want Liverpool to do it and cut into in terms of how many titles they've won it.
Yeah, that's definitely something to consider. But do you feel, Shane, that Liverpool are either getting tired or just kind of sensing that as the line gets closer, they're obviously the weight of history is just weighing on them a bit?
And it has to. It's only natural. It's absolutely natural. There's no doubt that they're tensing up. But you know, I think that's why Sunday is so important. If they did go and win that game on Sunday, you just feel it would then give them that confidence and impetus to potentially, I won't say not hit any more stumbling blocks, but I think it could give them the confidence to say, yeah, this is our title. We are going to be able to drive on from here. I genuinely think it could give them that much drive, and that's why it really is such an important game for them.
I suppose in terms of Manchester City as well, just the belief they must get from what they did last night and the predicament they found themselves in, you know, it was sensational stuff, Gary, really, the last 10-15 minutes to come from such a hole to basically end the tie there and then.
It's amazing in terms of the resilience. We obviously admire and wax lyrical over their quality, but it's that resilience, that continually jabbing, continually knocking on the door to force victories, and that's the type of performance, the type of win that suggests they will be title winners again. And they're brilliant to watch. The manager's sensational. And at times I look at the comparisons that say people are trying to say about Sarri in terms of his philosophy at Chelsea and comparing it to Pep Guardiola's. It's a nonsense, that comparison, because he has a philosophy, Pep Guardiola, that he never deviates away from. But there's so many variations to how that City team play. It's not one way. They can play 5, they can play 4. They make decisions in terms of players playing in positions you never associate with them. And it's so easy now to predict. And you're quite right, Shane, in terms of saying United going to Chelsea and winning. But Solskjaer had all the time in the world to prep for that game, because Chelsea are never going to do anything different. That's the problem you have when you face City, is that they can do anything at any given moment. Even within periods of game, they can go from 3 or 4 different systems.
I couldn't agree more with you. I mean, with a manager's hat on, watching Chelsea is very, very boring. You're never going to learn anything new. You're never going to be surprised. The only thing you're going to find out from game to game is Kovacic going to come on for Barkley, or is Barkley going to come on for Kovacic? Whereas, again, last night, some of the surprises that Pep sprung last night. I mean, it's one of the only times I've watched a game and by the final whistle still hadn't managed to put a number on what you'd call the formation or the shape they were using. It was absolute. And then his changes complicated it even more. You know, it's absolutely intriguing.
It is. It's for a student of football, it's fascinating to watch, isn't it? Because it's not something that's just done on a whim. There's no doubt in my mind that they've been coached to do that on the training ground. And that's what's so impressive, that they're able to do it. Now, listen, I know they spent a lot of money on these players as such, but I see the amount of money United are playing and spent on players. They could never do that. And that just shows you how good he is tactically.
Just getting back to the game on Sunday, Trent Alexander-Arnold and Van Dijk, I presume both will start. I think that's massive for Liverpool, but Pogba, this is kind of his stage. He was probably shown up a little bit against PSG, or I think he might have been shown up in terms of the limitations of his teammates maybe against PSG, but brilliant against Chelsea. But Gary, this game on Sunday, it just feels like Pogba will want this to be Pogba time, and how will Liverpool counteract that? Who do you think they might actually, could they even use Fabinho to marshal him, or what are you expecting?
Yeah, well, listen, that is a key pivotal position. Whoever is playing at the base of that midfield. We saw Henderson do it well against Bayern. We know Fabinho can do it, but it's a real trust issue. The manager has to get that right because of the form that Pogba's in. The very fact that he's able to run away from people, even when he gets squared with them. As a central midfielder, he can drop a shoulder, he can beat them. That's the concern. And it's not even, in terms of the stats, what he's got, they're staggering. I was looking at it here, 15 goals he's played a part in the 12 games under Solskjaer. 9 goals, 6 assists. I mean, that's fantastic. That's brilliant stats. That suggests that he is a top player. My only concern is, and as you identified there, Johnny, is that can you rely on him when it really matters? Can you rely on? And that remains to be seen.
I don't think you can, Shane, because he obviously down tools under Mourinho. So if he down tools under Mourinho, he'll down tools under somebody else. And he showed remarkable petulance at the end of the PSG game when clearly, Shaw made a pretty sloppy 1-2 and he should have been sent off.
Well, the one thing you have to say about him, if Pep is box office as a manager, Pogba is box office as a player, because have you ever heard anybody utter the sentence, Pogba was reasonably good tonight? Like, that line never comes out. He's one of the most polarising players you'll get. He's 1 minute he's the best player in the world, and the next he's an absolute fraud, and he's a chancer, and he's this and he's that. There seems to be no middle ground with him. And
well, on his game, he's pretty much, apart from maybe Messi, he's pretty much as good as there is.
But the argument might be similar to what you've just said about Salah, is he on his game enough against the very, very best? And that's the question mark again going in Sunday.
Is that the winning and losing of the game, Gary?
Well, no, I think there's match winners. There's so many players who decide it. The goalkeepers, I think De Gea will have to be a man-of-match performance as well. We've seen it so often. He's looking at the real deal again. There's so many key battles throughout this game. I think Van Dijk, that presence there, the very fact that he can go up against Pogba. If Pogba faces him up 1v1 and knocks it, he's not going to beat him. There's no doubt. He's a giant of a centre-half in terms of his physical capabilities, his pace, his mobility. So there's so many potential match winners throughout this game on both sides, which is why it's such a fascinating contest. But I think to stop United playing, you have to identify Pogba, especially bearing in mind that Martial, Lingard, 2/3 of their attacking options are out injured. The very fact that Solskjaer now has to rely on people that he don't have 100% trust in. Sanchez is still trying to get there. Lukaku still he's a bit cumbersome. Looks like he's not firing on all cylinders. So it is a big game. I'm looking forward to it. It should be a classic, and it should be nothing like the dour games that you would see. Ultimately, Mourinho set his United team up quite at times needing to do up against the Liverpool's attacking flair, but I think Solskjaer will go after him at certain scenarios in terms of counter-attacking. So I'm really looking forward to it.
The one player who United fans are kind of raving about at the moment, who's kind of floating under the radar a little bit, is Herrera. United fans are
I think it's just he wears his heart on his sleeve, but whether they have the quality to kind of stop that Liverpool juggernaut. I'm going to ask you to call it, Gary. I think Liverpool will just hit them on the break, and I think they'll win comfortably enough. How do you call it?
I think Liverpool would dominate. I know, we've got two teams who are devastating on a counter-attack, but I think Liverpool would dominate possession. I think United will want to suck them in a little bit to create a bit of space. But if I had to go for anyone, and this is the one thing I say, if you're going to be title winners, you have to go to these places and win. Regardless of the rivalry, the history between both games, if you're looking to win the title, you have to go away to the fourth best team in the league and you have to win. And I just feel that Liverpool will do it, because I don't think that United defence is good enough.
Shane?
Yeah, I'd be of the same opinion. If I'd be leaning towards, I think there'll be goals. I definitely think there'll be goals. I think we're probably looking at if I had to go for one, I'd say 2-1 to Liverpool. Yeah.
But who wins the title, Gary?
Well, as Shane said there, it would be an unbelievable result if they do go and win there. The momentum they'll have, and I think they'll probably have a really strong end to the season, but City will still win the title.
Thanks very much, Gary.
Thanks, lads.
Cheers, Gary.
Good luck.